There's a really common misconception about Jesus that a lot of people have. You may have heard people say Jesus never actually claimed to be God. But that's not true. Jesus does claim to be God in lots of different ways in the Gospels. The reason you may have read the Gospels and thought he never claimed to be God is probably because Jesus is alluding to Jewish stories from the Old Testament, stories of the God of Israel that you might not be very familiar with. So think of it like this. If I put on a blue suit and I carried a metal shield with an American flag on it and I ran around a local park saying, "On your left," you would probably know who I was pretending to be, who I was dressing up as. Captain America, right? I would be pretending to be Captain America. But if I time traveled to Victorian London and then I ran around the cobbled streets and all these cockneys saw me in the blue suit with the shield, they would have no idea because they have never read or seen a Marvel story. They don't know the visual clues I'm giving them that I'm pretending to be Captain America. A lot of us today in the 21st century don't know the stories of ancient Israel. Unless you've read the Old Testament and really familiarized yourself with those stories, if you then read the Gospels, there's a lot that's going to go over your head. You're going to miss a lot of references. Like if you're going to watch Endgame without watching the earlier Marvel films, a lot will go over your head. You probably enjoy the story. There's a lot of things that you will understand, but there's a lot of references that you won't understand, and so you'll be missing some of the things that are being communicated. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a few stories about the God of Israel from the Old Testament, and then tell you a few stories from the Gospels to show you how Jesus is claiming to be God. He's identifying himself with the God of the Old Testament. And the reactions that he gets show that they knew what he was trying to say as well. So the first story I want to tell you is from Exodus. In the book of Exodus, Israel are slaves in Egypt. Moses has fled from Egypt and he meets with God at a burning bush. And God tells Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go." Moses is quite nervous. One of his questions is, if I go and I say, "Let my people go," what if they ask me, "Who sent you?" What do I tell them? And God's answer is, tell them, "I am has sent you." Tell them, "I am who I am is the one who is sending you, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Israel, the God of your ancestors." So God shares his name with Moses. His name is something like, "I am who I am." Now the name of God is written in the Bible in many places. Most pages of the Old Testament you will see capital L-O-R-D. And you'll also see in some places capital L and then lowercase o-r-d. And that's because the translators are trying to tell you these are different words. So if it's all caps, it's the name of God. It's been represented in English letters as L-O-R-D. Not because the name means Lord, but because the translation convention since ancient times has been to render the name as the Lord. So it started with the Greek translation, the Septuagint, which said ho kurios, which means the Lord or the Master. This is because of a taboo to do with pronouncing the name of God. At some point in history, it began to be thought that the name was too sacred to say out loud, or even too sacred to translate into another language. So we still see this in English translations. Often English translations will say Lord in capital letters instead of transliterating the name. The name, you've probably heard people attempting to pronounce it. One way to try and pronounce it is Jehovah, and another way is Yahweh. Yahweh is what most modern linguists think is probably close to accurate. Jehovah is an anglicized attempt to pronounce it, taking the vowels of the Hebrew word Lord, Adonai, Jehovah. It's taking those vowels and putting them on the four letters that make up the name Yahweh, which were Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. So the name is in the Bible in lots of places, but you probably won't have read it unless you have a specific translation that's trying to transliterate the name instead of just say Lord in capital letters. But anyway, in this scene where God tells Moses, I am is sending you, it's linking the name Yahweh with the Hebrew phrase I am who I am, or I am. The name Yahweh is basically it's saying God's name comes from his who he is eternally. He is the one who exists, the one who is unchanging, the one who will always be and who always was. And so that's where his name comes from. We see in the Gospels Jesus uses this name to identify himself. So in John chapter 8, Jesus is having a difficult conversation with some of his fellow Jews. And he tells them that they are slaves to sin. And this offends them. They say, we've never been slaves. We're sons of Abraham and we've never been slaves. It's a strange thing to say, that we've never been slaves, when you've been conquered by the Romans. And also a huge part of the national story is that they were slaves in Egypt and that God rescued them from slavery. So it's strange that they would say that, but Jesus is saying, just like your ancestors were enslaved to Pharaoh, you have a problem that you need saving from. You're enslaved to sin. You're enslaved to this internal evil that is corrupting you and causing you to reject God and to rebel against God, and actually to reject Jesus himself in this conversation he's having with them. He says to them, anyone who hears my words and believes them will live forever. In Numbers, during Israel's wandering in the desert, they're sustained by special bread from heaven called manna. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, God explains to Moses that people don't live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. So God's words give you life. And Jesus, in this conversation about sin, he says, my words give you life. If you hear my words and believe, you will have life, just like your ancestors who, when they escaped from Pharaoh and were set free from slavery, they needed to listen to God's voice to have life. And many of them didn't, and they died in the wilderness. So there's one way where Jesus is connecting himself with God. Just like God, his words give life. Whose words give life apart from God's? Is Jesus another being that can give life with his very voice? Like the God who said, let there be light, and then there was light? Or is Jesus identifying himself with God? Well, they think it's really weird that Jesus would say that. So they call him out and they say, well, Abraham died, but you're saying that your words give life. Are you better than Abraham? And Jesus says, Abraham rejoiced to see my day. So he's saying, yes, I am better than Abraham. He would have loved to have been here when I'm doing my ministry. So they think that this is a strange thing to say, because Jesus is about 30 years old and Abraham has been dead for over 1,000 years, nearly 2,000 years. So they ask Jesus, how does that work? How could Abraham have seen your day? And Jesus replies, before Abraham was, I am. Now, if you've never read the Old Testament, you might just think Jesus is not very good at grammar, because that's not the right way to say it, is it? Before Abraham was, I already existed, or before Abraham was, I was, or I was before Abraham. That's proper grammar, isn't it? If you're just trying to say I existed before Abraham, that's a kind of a crazy thing for a 30-year-old man in the first century to say. But if that's all he was trying to say, that would be the right way to say it. But if you know the story, God is telling Moses, go and set my people free. Tell Pharaoh, set my people free. Jesus is saying, you're slaves that need to be set free. Moses is sent by, I am. And then Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. That's how Abraham rejoiced to see my day. Well, then maybe you'll figure it out now. Maybe you're not just thinking Jesus is bad at grammar, but you're thinking, oh, Jesus is identifying himself with the God of Abraham and Isaac and Moses, the God who met Moses at the burning bush, the God who freed Israel from slavery and is now offering them another experience of freedom from a different kind of slavery, a spiritual slavery. Well, that is, if that's what clicked in your head as I'm telling you these stories, then you have recognized that Jesus is claiming to be God. And so did the people he was talking to, because they picked up stones to kill him. Because if you, in a monotheistic religion, if you equate yourself with the one God, then that's blasphemy. And in the ancient world, you'd be killed for that. Some people will say, okay, well, you are sharing an example with me from the Gospel of John, and that was the last Gospel to be written. So there's this idea that in the earlier Gospels, Mark is generally thought to be the earliest. There's not all of this stuff about Jesus being God. And then you have a development to the last Gospel to be written, John, where he is saying things like that. So some people say, okay, well, it's just John. Jesus never actually claimed to be God. It's just John made that scene up. But this scene in John is not the only time that Jesus uses the phrase I am in a situation where the context is implying that he's equating himself with God. So I'm going to tell you two more stories from the Old Testament and then another story from the Gospels about Jesus, this time from Mark's Gospel. We're back in Exodus. Moses has gone to the Israelites, he's gone to Pharaoh, he's said, let my people go, there's been plagues. Eventually the people are free, they pass through the Red Sea, and they get to Mount Sinai where they enter into a covenant with God. They enter into a relational contract with God. He is going to be their king. He's a good king and a good master, and he gives them a holy day a week. Slaves don't get a day off, but in the covenant at Sinai, you have the Sabbath. They can spend a day worshipping God every week. They stop their work and they receive life from God. Now, in this part of Exodus, Moses asks if he can meet with God face to face. But God says, if you see my face, you'll die. So what we'll do instead is I'm going to put you in a cave, in a cleft in the rock. And I'm going to pass by this cleft and you'll see my back. So you can see me, but not my face. And you'll see me and you'll live. So God passes by, and as he passes by, he says his name, Yahweh, Yahweh, gracious, abounding in love. And Moses has this experience of God passing by him. And in that language of God passing by is used in other parts of the Old Testament. It's like it's a recurring phrase to describe an encounter with God. So one of those is in the book of Job. Job talks about how God has passed by him as God goes out to trample on the waters. He's gone to walk on the sea. And this is perhaps not meaning much to you. What does it mean that God would pass by and go and walk on the waters? Well, Job is a really poetic book, and Job is doing some poetry here. He's talking about how he feels. So he's using the sea as a symbol of chaos. The sea is where the Leviathan, this chaos monster, lives. The sea is seen as something that human life can't flourish there. If you try and go to the sea, you might die. If you're in a boat, you'd probably be okay. If you don't have a boat, you're going to die. Even in a boat, you are risking your life. Sailing on the sea is a terrifying thing because the sea is more powerful than you and the sea can destroy you. The sea is used as a symbol for chaos in a lot of ancient literature. It's used as a symbol for chaos in the Bible as well. Job, the whole book of Job is about suffering. Job's experience of suffering and his questions about why is God allowing this to happen to me? And when he talks about God passing by, it's a poetic use of this language of God passing by. But instead of saying God is revealing himself to me like he did to Moses, he's saying God's like leaving me behind. the chaos in my life is overwhelming me and I feel alone. And I believe that God is going and, ruling the earth and doing something about chaos and suffering in the world. But what about the chaos and suffering I'm experiencing? I've been passed by and God is off doing whatever he's doing, and I'm alone and I'm suffering. Now we'll jump to Jesus again. These two scenes, passing by and walking on water. Jesus in the Gospels allows his disciples to go on a boat. They're crossing the Sea of Galilee, which is a lake in northern Israel, a huge lake. And as they're crossing, there's a storm, a strong wind. So the disciples are unable to make any progress. They're rowing against the wind and they're stuck. Jesus is on a hillside praying. It's the middle of the night, and he sees the storm and he decides to go to his disciples. So he's going to his disciples and he's walking on water. He's walking on the stormy waves. When he gets close to them, it says that Jesus was about to pass by them. Now, if you were just reading this in the Gospels and you don't know all of the Old Testament stories, you maybe would see that Jesus is going to his disciples, and then a couple of sentences later, he's about to pass by them. He's going past them. So maybe you'd think, what's going on here? Is Jesus going to them, or is he passing by them? Has he changed his mind? It would probably be confusing to us, just like a Cockney geezer in London seeing a man in blue spandex running around carrying an American flag shield. It would be confusing. And that would be because maybe you don't know these stories about God passing by people to reveal himself to them. Or you don't know the stories about God passing by Job and stamping on the water, on the chaos water. So Jesus walking on water and then making the storm go calm, and passing by his disciples. This is all Jesus acting like God. The disciples see him and they're afraid. They think that they've seen a ghost. So they understand that something supernatural is happening. Now, we probably understand something supernatural is happening because walking on water is supernatural. But they think they're having an encounter with some supernatural being, but they don't realize who that supernatural being is. Jesus then speaks to them to calm them down. And in English, if you read English translation, it will say something like, "Don't be afraid, take heart, it is I, it's me." But the phrase Jesus uses that's translated, "it is I," is the Greek ego eimi, which means I am. This is the same phrase that Jesus uses in John chapter 8, when he says, "Before Abraham was, ego eimi, I am." So now, just saying ego eimi is not necessarily someone saying that they're God. They might just be, you might say, "Are you the blind man that Jesus healed?" And then you say, "Ego eimi, I am." That's not a claim to be God. That's just, you're saying, you're identifying yourself. Yeah, that's me, I am. Not every time someone says I am is a claim to be God. But the context helps us interpret what's going on. So in context, if somebody is saying, "My words give you life, and I existed before Abraham, and I can set you free from slavery just like God set your ancestors free from slavery," and then they say, "I am." Or if someone is about to pass by in some supernatural way that demonstrates their power over the forces of chaos in the world, and then they say, "I am," then these are contexts where that is not just saying "I am," but the religious significance of the other things that he's saying and doing. In context, he is identifying himself with the God of Israel, with the great I am, with the God of Moses, with the God who fights the Leviathan, the chaos monster, the God who defeats Pharaoh and brings his people out of slavery. So those are two stories from the Gospels where I think it's really clear, if you are aware of the stories of Israel's God, then you will see Jesus is identifying himself with Israel's God. He's acting like he is the one who can free Israel from slavery. He is the one who can trample on the chaos waters and make the storm go still. He is the one who speaks, and when you hear and believe, you receive life. If you're interested in seeing more of these examples, you can click the link on the description. But also, before I finish the video, I want to just share a couple of reflections. Now, in these examples where Jesus is communicating his divinity, he's also challenging us and giving us hope. He challenges us about our slavery to sin. He challenges us about the evil in our hearts that corrupts us, that makes us selfish and greedy, that makes us choose our own pleasure instead of love and service to others, that makes us treat ourselves as if the world revolves around us instead of recognizing that God is the creator who deserves our love and praise and worship. He also offers us hope, though. The forces of chaos are external to me, right? I have a problem in my heart, but also I have a problem outside of myself. Even if I was set free from the problem in my heart, there's all of these powers around me. There's evil spirits, there's evil governments, there's evil men and women that want to harm and oppress and hurt the world that God created. Jesus is challenging us, but he's also giving us hope. He's challenging us about our internal problem that we need to recognize. I have a problem I need help with. Jesus is the one who can set me free from that problem. Through his death on the cross, my evil within me can die with him. Jesus is challenging us to choose that. What will your choice be today? Will you ask Jesus to set you free from your internal struggles and begin a journey of transformation that will result in a person who is loving and kind and patient, who knows their Creator and worships him? There's also a message of encouragement. Sometimes, most of the time, I think my biggest problem is me. But sometimes my biggest problem is people that are doing evil things to me, trying to scam me, trying to rob my family, or people who are trying to hurt me. If you have these situations at the moment in your life that are causing you distress and pain, there is someone who can help, who can bring peace. Even if these things don't stop immediately, we can have peace in the midst of the storm. Like the disciples rowing and not getting anywhere in our own strength, we could call on Jesus to come and bring peace into the midst of the storm that we're experiencing. I just want to finish with a prayer. If you've watched this far through the video, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you spending this time with me and look forward to seeing you again. Please like the video if it was helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more, and share the video as well if you like. Now I'm going to pray about some of the things I shared. Thank you, Lord, that you are all powerful. You have power over the forces of chaos. Thank you that your words give life. Thank you that you are able to forgive us and change us. I pray for people watching this video that they would experience the peace that comes from knowing you, and that they would experience the forgiveness that you offer and the new life that you offer as well. Amen.